Hello, in this video, let us see what are the different steps of experimental research design. The question was this way: suppose you plan to conduct an experimental study, discuss the steps you would follow. It was there from June 2020 question paper. First of all, we have to define the experimental research design. Experimental design is the process of carrying out research in an objective and controlled fashion so that precision is maximized and specific conclusion can be drawn on a hypothesis. That is the definition for experimental design. Then, experimentation helps in establishing causal relationship among different events in the educational situation under control condition. We are doing the experimental research in a control condition, and there are two variables, independent variable and dependent variable. Researcher always observe change in the dependent variable. This change in the dependent variable is due to the independent variable. In this example, we are taking as achievement as the dependent variable, and we are observing the achievement of the students, and independent variable is the self-instructional method. Now let us see which are the few steps that a researcher has to follow systematically while conducting an experimental research studies. In first step, he has to establish his research question and he has to set his variables. Which are the variables? Independent variables and dependent variable. Independent variables are the variables that will be subjected to manipulation and has the impact we are observing in the dependent variable. Example for a research question: what effect do self-instructional method do on the achievement of class 9 students? Here the independent variable is self-instructional method and dependent variable is achievement of the students. In the next step, the researcher has to build hypothesis. His research hypothesis as well as the null hypothesis. Research hypothesis should be a specific testable statement that outline what you expect to find and what should emerge from your research studies. While formulating the hypothesis, we should keep the following points in mind. The hypothesis should describe the change you are testing. What change we are testing on the dependent variable. Then next point, we should describe the impact you expect due to the change. Due to the change in achievement, what impact is going to happen in the educational field. The next one, that hypothesis should describe who you expect to be impacted. Here the 9th standard students are getting impacted. The next point, a hypothesis should be appropriate and testable for the kind of research design you are carrying out. Which type of research design we are carrying out, with the help of that our hypothesis should be testable. There are two types of hypothesis: null hypothesis and experimental hypothesis. Null hypothesis usually we state in the form of a negative sentence. For example, there is no significant effect when the researcher is administering self-instructional method in the science classroom. But the research hypothesis says there is a significant impact on the achievement of the students when we are administering the self-instructional method. In the next step, the researcher is designing his treatment. Here he decide which is his population. For example, here the 9th standard students. So which class, which division, how many subjects should be there in each group. All these things here he is deciding here. Decide how to manipulate the independent variable. Which way he is manipulating the independent variable. Researchers should manipulate the independent variable in such a way that it should not affect the internal or external validity of the treatment. In the next step, categorize subject into groups. The experimenter or researcher is categorizing the subject into group. For that, he is using any one approach like complete randomization approach or randomized block design. In complete randomized design, the researcher is selecting the subject or keeping the subject randomly in both the groups, that is the experimental group and the control group. But in randomized block design, first the researcher is selecting subject into various blocks based on the intervening variable. Later on, he select the subject randomly from these blocks for his control group and the experimental group. Then in step 5, he is administering the treatment. In this experiment, researcher is administering the self-instructional method in the treatment group and he is continuing with the conventional method in the control group. What is the next step? In the next step, researcher is scoring the subject with the help of valid and reliable tool. Then step 7, compare the treatment group with the control group. In the treatment group, we are administering the self-instructional method in this example, and the other one we are with the control group, we are keeping as such or we are following the conventional method. So here the experimenter is comparing both the groups. Compare the mean score of the treatment group and the control group to find out whether there is any significant effect of self-instructional method on the achievement of the students. That is step 7. Then in the step 8, we are publish our findings, or the researcher is publishing his findings. Publish our findings for the reference of other researchers or for further studies. These are the different steps an experimenter or a researcher has to follow in order to conduct the experimental research design.